hey, maybe this is something we can talk about on our next podcast, because I don't have the research, or I haven't researched it or backed it.
Yeah.
But I saw a psychologist today for Nathaniel, because he is what you call twice exceptional, which means he's actually more than twice exceptional.
Twice exceptional? Are
Yeah.
you serious? That's like a classifying of human being nowadays.
Well, in the ASD world, yeah. So you've got, like, you can have ADHD, ASD, or ASD, high IQ, anxiety, ADHD. Like, you can have a combination. Nathaniel's actually got more than two, right? But I was speaking. So today was the initial consultation, and she wanted to speak to me first before she wants to get really good insight into his profile before she met him. And she doesn't like to have the child in the room in the first meeting, because you got to speak about a lot of sensitive matters, and she doesn't want the child feeling bad about themselves.
Yes.
And she said, we were talking about ADHD and the nuances of ADHD. Like we've talked about before, people think that ADHD is just hyperactivity and the inability to concentrate, where it's so much more than that. It's a lot more than that. And she asked me a really interesting question. She said, does he experience shame? I was like, yeah, he really does. Like, he's really, like, when he feels triggered, like he gets quite depressed. And I said, and oftentimes that is linked to something someone said, a belief that he's been reduced or criticized in some way, or corrected in some way. Like he just like, oh. And I was like, you know what? I do the same thing. Like, I recognize what you're asking. I actually do the same thing. And she said it was, on the next podcast, I will correct myself if it's not the right thing, but it's something to the tune of, it's called social rejection dysmorphia. Have you heard of body dysmorphia? When you don't see your body for what it is. Like, anorexic people could think they're fat, or large people can think they look like they did when they were 20 kilos less. It's called body dysmorphia, right? So there's this social rejection dysmorphia. Like I said, I'm not a psychologist, disclaimer. Like, I have to double check that I've got that title.
Social rejection dysmorphia.
Yes. So when someone says something to you, and just a conversation, right, and you interpret that as a rejection or a judgment or something like that, your response to it is extreme. So you know how we were talking about, like, I've always been quite easily offended by what people say or what people think, and you're always like, man, for years you've always been like, who cares? Don't worry about him. What do you care for? Like, you always said that to me, and I'm like, oh, you don't understand, you robot. But it's a thing. So something connected to ADHD is this: the conclusion that we make is someone's opinion or someone's comment is way more extreme than what it is. I'm like, I'm going to research that. That's really interesting, because I can relate.
The other thing that I heard about that, and which really turned me from not caring to not caring at all, was when I read this line, I was like, oh, that means a lot to me when I hear it that way. And it's like, why would you get offended out of a few words that some random person or any person made up in their head and then said out loud? They're just like words. I was like, oh, so this is when you conceptualize the thing that it is, and then you're like, yeah, like they're just this one person.
It's just like compute output.
Yeah.
Right? And then we have this extreme reaction to just that output that someone's
in their stupid little head.
Yeah. Well, like I said to you, like I recognize it, and I'm not too big to say, all right, that's a weak spot of mine. But again, in saying that, people could try and be nicer. Because there are situations where people are out of line, and it's not social rejection dysmorphia, if that's the correct title. Sometimes people are just out of line.
Sometimes people are just out of line. People in
entitled
general,
they're entitled to their opinions. But my question for you, Jason, I have a question for you.